Apparently, I missed a really interesting detail in God of War Ragnarök. Because I no longer have Twitter, I now have to personally be on the lookout for God of War news. Whether it's news or just rumors, it's now up to me to look for them. And it was during one of these searches that I came across a really interesting Reddit discussion titled, Sif is reading the Torah. At first, I thought this was a joke, but the more I read the comments there, I came to realize that this was true. Sif in God of War Ragnarök is indeed reading the Torah, aka the Old Testament. Now, I'll be honest with you, I don't know why I didn't notice this detail during my playthroughs of the game. Using photo mode to look for details is one of my favorite new things to do with new God of War games, so I don't know how I missed this. Well, I mean, now that I think about it, maybe there's a good reason. Maybe I was using photo mode to look at another detail in that scene. Needless to say, I am very late to talking about this. But since one of the users named VladFired actually mentioned me in this discussion, I felt like I needed to give my thoughts on it. I mean, look, I love talking about Doom and Lies of P, but there's obviously something special about making God of War theories, especially when it comes to discussing biblical topics within the God of War series. Now, old Kuba would be jumping up and down at the thought that a God of War character was reading the Old Testament. And that part will come later in the video, but first I think it's important to also offer a more calm and reasonable response. Because developers reusing certain assets in their games isn't something new, and God of War is no exception. Back in God of War 3, we see Hermes flipping a coin, and if you use photo mode, you will see that it's an actual historical coin. Although, not one found in ancient Greece, but one depicts the coronation of King George IV. Obviously, Santa Monica wasn't teasing anything about King George. Most likely, they just needed a coin for Hermes, so they simply used a scan of an already existing coin to make their jobs easier. Santa Monica probably just needed a scroll of some kind and simply used one that was already scanned. It also doesn't make much sense story-wise that Sif would be able to read Hebrew. Remember, the reason Odin needed Atreus was to decipher the foreign languages found on the mask. Why would he seek out Atreus if he already had a professional linguist living in Asgard? So that's my most calm and reasonable explanation as to why Sif is reading the Torah. Now, one that's a little bit more out there is that this could be a small reference to the fact that the Norse people eventually abandoned their gods to worship Jesus. So having one of the top Norse deities reading the Old Testament could be a small nod to this historical fact. But let's be honest, these aren't the takes you clicked on this video for. You wanna know if I believe this could be Santa Monica teasing a future game where they'll explore the Abrahamic religions. Now, as I've always said regarding this topic, I find this very hard to believe. Mainly because I don't think a game that rewrites the stories that are still being worshipped by millions would go over very well. But then again, they did include the Torah in the game, a religious text revered by both Jewish and Christian people. So maybe they do think there's a way to write a story about the Abrahamic religions in a way that wouldn't be offensive. At the very least, we know that at one point they were considering this, as reference to Christianity can be found all the way back to God of War 1, with a painting of Jesus being crucified. This was probably David Jaffe's doing, as he envisioned the ending for the God of War series with the three wise men visiting the baby Jesus. But this was years ago, there's no way Santa Monica is thinking of doing something similar again, right? Well, that's where I'm not so sure anymore. About 5 years ago, Cory Barlog was asked on Twitter if Christianity was part of the God of War universe, to which he responded by simply saying yes. So here we have confirmation from the lead God of War director confirming that the Abrahamic religions are part of the God of War universe. Does that mean that a story about them will be written? I'm still not sure. They might make a small reference to them in future games without actually depicting Jesus or the God of the Old Testament. Many fans believe that the next mainline God of War game will be set in Egypt, and as I'm sure you know, one of the most famous Old Testament stories takes place in Egypt. What if it gets revealed in the next game that Kratos helped the Hebrews cross the Red Sea by holding back Egypt's army? I feel like a small reference like that doesn't replace the Jewish God wouldn't offend many religious people. So that could be a way to do it. But another way, and one that I prefer, is, well, the higher plane of existence, baby. I know you must be fried hearing me talk about this, but I really do think there are small hints about Gnosticism in God of War. They may not be as obvious as, say, Lies of P, but they are there. And many people don't know this, but Gnosticism was a religious interpretation of the events surrounding Jesus' life, although their interpretation was very different from traditional Christianity. A big distinction being that they believed the God we read about in the Old Testament was the evil demiurge, while Jesus came down from the Pleroma to save us from his rule. Maybe Santa Monica could get away by telling a similar story, but I suspect they would have to keep biblical characters very vague to avoid anger. This is an approach that works well with Souls-likes, but not so much with PlayStation style for storytelling. So I really don't know what to make out of all of these things. If they're not planning on making a story about Christianity or Judaism, why say that they are part of the universe? Or why make Sif read the Old Testament? Couldn't they just have random gibberish written on it, or even nothing at all? I really don't know. Sometimes I think they are planning something, but I just don't know how they'll be able to pull it off without offending religious people. I'm okay with it, but I know a lot of people wouldn't. So how about you let me know in the comments section below. If you're a religious person, do you mind if you see characters like God or Jesus being included in a God of War game? Also, let me know if you're able to read Hebrew. Maybe we can get a better idea about what exactly Sif is reading here. I doubt it's important, but at least it would be fun to know. And lastly, let me know what you think about this. Is this just a case of developers using an asset for their game, or are they teasing something? Whatever your thoughts and theories are, make sure to leave them in the comments section below. As always, I want to give a big thanks to all of my YouTube and Patreon members for supporting the channel monthly. I would also like to thank all of you who like and share my videos. It may not seem like much, but it really does help. And with that said, thanks for watching. And remember, go forth in the name of Olympus.